Instinct Part 1 has been called a cinematic album, and for good reason. The description provides a movie-like summary, which explains the role each song plays in the story, and once you read the lyrics, it's fairly easy to understand how it all comes together. I found Instinct Part 2 fascinating since the day it came out, when I first fell in love with OnlyOneOf. I know Part 1 is a fan favorite, and I could never quite put my finger on anything that would justify why Part 2 resonates so much more with me. Instinct Part 2 is somewhat of an enigma. We're never told explicitly that it's a continuation, but we're given a short, vague description for each of the tracks, giving it a sense of a cohesive narrative. This time, instead of the story being told by a third-person narrator, they're in first person, making it more of a personal and subjective experience. Part 1 tells you what it's about, while Part 2 invites you to connect the dots for yourself. The longer I thought about these albums, the more connections I found with their discography and videography as a whole, and I realized how much broader of a picture it helps paint. I know this video is really long, but I really felt the need to convey all of these things and be thorough, because I'm really passionate about OnlyOneOf and this project. I hope my ideas will help more people appreciate these two albums as a complete and well thought out work of art. Before we dive into the individual tracks, I want to bring up Freud's idea of erOs and thanatOs, the two human drives. Considering the album colors and the citation of Freud under libidO, I think it's likely they've gotten some inspiration from it, and that the two albums correspond with these two instincts. Instinct Part 1 is erOs, a drive towards life, love, sexuality, and creativity. Comme des garçons is a Japanese fashion brand which takes its name from a French song sung by Françoise Hardy titled Tous les garçons et les filles, like all the boys and girls. The singer wonders about all the boys and girls her age finding love and making plans for the future. She sees them holding hands as they walk down the street, free of fear and knowing the meaning of happiness, and she feels left behind in her lack of maturity compared to her peers. She's alienated in her boredom, fear of tomorrow, her loneliness. There is nobody who loves her, but she wants to know what love feels like. There is a sense of her being someone who's just starting to grow up, which echoes the description of the boy, our point of view character in this album. Nine said that the song Question Mark, released in between the Instinct albums, can be seen as a prequel to the boy's story.
소년이 이제 본인의 본능이 끌려가는 과정에서 생긴 물음이나 의문을 담으려 한 곡이고요. 널 보면 알 수 없는 맘이 나의 목을 죄요. 내게 넌 나에게 익숙해진 감정을 숨기고 있어.
The lyrics are about being confronted with new, unfamiliar feelings, while at the same time hiding the familiar feelings. A paradox acknowledged in the lyrics. He loses sleep over the fear that the answers will be painful, because deep down, he already knows what he's feeling, but chooses to close his eyes and ignore that. To contrast that,
새로운 눈을 뜨고 let me know begin feel so free 완한 손에 파도 eyes open see 그 안에 침착 이제 내게 눈을 떠.
Going from the idea of refusing to analyze yourself to accepting yourself, the boy begins his journey of self-discovery. libidO talks about the awakening of sexuality, as well as exploration and experimentation. The line that people point out a lot is "Your ass wanna know." Seemingly out of place in a music video that explores attraction between men. Some have suggested that it's meant to fool broadcasting stations, that the song isn't really gay so they let them perform it, but that might be doing a disservice to OnlyOneOf's artistry and intention. The members' characters are exploring their own desires on screen, and while the visual and lyrical ideas are similar, the specific stories differ. We can safely assume that the boy is meant to be bisexual, and libidO, while being about his attraction to a woman, is also about a larger acceptance of his instincts and desires. It seems to be a common experience for bisexual people to realize their attraction to the opposite gender first, since it's already expected and easier to explore. But societal pressure isn't the only thing the boy has to deal with. He was raised Christian, so he's learned to view sexuality and queerness as something forbidden. Exploring it for the first time is both exciting and scary to him. He's starting with the quote-unquote safer option first, but he's still aware of his blooming queerness. For now though, he chooses not to think about that other side of himself. The description tells us, the more the boy tries to suppress libidO, the stronger it gets and the more impact it has on his subconscious behavior. Though he's accepting and understanding himself through this experience, there is still a part that he's refusing to acknowledge, and it distorts the way he interacts with the world and other people, something he works through for this entire storyline. libidO was an internal monologue about things he feels and wishes to take further. After questioning and accepting it, or a part of it anyway, as something that exists inside of him, he now wishes to act on it and explore it with another person. Instinct is about his newfound attraction to someone, especially her scent. I really like the line because it highlights that this is just the beginning of his journey of self-discovery. He found a girl he's attracted to and he doesn't question that, but he's also aware in the back of his mind that it's not the end. He's still lost and has more questions than answers. For now though, he chooses to focus on this moment and this person. Another line I find interesting is I don't want your love tonight. I'll talk about this in more detail later, but a lot of OnlyOneOf's pre-instinct era songs seem to say that in order to have a full, satisfying, healthy relationship, the subject needs to grow up, understand and accept himself. Even in relationships with women, he can't just suppress and not think about his queerness, because in the long run, it'll become poison to the relationship. It's a vital part of his nature, and not exploring it at all is doing himself injustice and stopping his growth as a person. Holy Week comes before byredO, which shows the boy's need to elevate his lover to a holy status to make himself feel less guilty for the things he feels for her. He's been slowly getting further away from God and he turns his worship elsewhere, but the pedestal he puts her on distorts their relationship. In byredO, the boy's attraction turns intense to the point of obsession. He doesn't see his lover for the person that she is, only focusing on the physical aspect of the relationship, and putting it above anything else. Her scent, his new god. It also connects to the drive towards creativity. The scent is inspiring to him, and he wants to create perfume from it. The description connects the song to the previous art pop tracks, Picasso and Dora Maar, highlighting the toxicity of seeing someone as your subject and reducing them only to the aspect that you find inspiring. Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about OnlyOneOf's story as a whole, because it helps put the next part of the boy's story in a much larger context. So far, we've been following familiar story beats. Savannah was called a forbidden fruit, Blossom talked about a young and inexperienced love, Angel put someone on a holy pedestal, and Dora Maar was about viewing someone as a muse rather than a person. Tear of God's obvious parallel is Sage, a song about religious guilt and pleas for forgiveness for biting the forbidden fruit, which ends with the subject suppressing his true nature completely. Take my hand, 네가 나의 신이 되어줘. 너의 두 눈의 angel, 나의 두 칼의 빈줄. 초라한 모습 비로소 깨달았어. 순수했던 나의 욕망, 부딪혔던 나의 절망, 더러워진 나의 제발 구해줘. It's by far the most queer-coded of their early songs, especially considering how they've been referring to queer people as lovers that couldn't be blessed. Angel's description confirms the song to be a continuation of Savannah and Sage, which means that it shows the effect of seeking that blessing and staying in that guilt and repression. Angel seems happy on the surface, but words soliloquy and encore imply this whole thing is nothing but a performance. Each of their moves is being watched by masked people and cameras. They're constantly in the spotlight, but aren't allowed to use the technology themselves. There are no real smiles on their faces, only stickers, and their body language is a stark contrast to their more recent releases. They never look at the angel, not even once. Most of the time they don't even acknowledge her presence as she leans on them. I haven't read Inferno, but I found this description of Beatrice's role in it. Beatrice is described as very lovely, with eyes flashing brighter than the stars and an angel's voice. Her beauty represents the beauties of heaven and inspires Dante to press forward in his spiritual journey. Ultimately, Beatrice is a compelling symbol of the wonder and power of divine grace. The angel is described as an inaccessible object which represents the dual-sidedness of good and evil. The girl in the music video is supposed to be the guardian angel at their shoulder, whose love will lead them away from sin and bring salvation. The woman we see in stage seems to be a Jesus figure, and the Theory of God description mentions the members singing in a female range in order to get closer to God, which positions women as somehow more holy. They're being put on a pedestal, which, as we've seen in Dora Maar and byredO, creates distance from the real human beneath, and the dynamic between her and the subject becomes toxic. Her wings are fake, so even though she's not wearing a mask like the others, she's still pretending to be someone she's not to keep them under control. This frame in particular makes me really uncomfortable. It's the only shot where it feels like her presence is being acknowledged, but her pose with the baseball bat looks almost threatening. It's also showcased by the change in the lyrics. A Song of Ice and Fire is about an unbalanced relationship in which the subject tries to fit himself to his partner despite their natures being at odds. He talks about the end being inevitable, but the description says they exist like this forever, which reminds me of these lines in Sage. Whether these songs are from the perspective of someone who's attracted to the opposite gender or not is, in my opinion, not clear, and both interpretations have merit. The characters in the music videos so far have shown obvious and clear interest exclusively in other men, but their discography as a whole, lyrically, seems to be bisexual. Still, even someone who likes people of the opposite gender can fall into harmful patterns while suppressing their queerness, getting into a straight relationship to feel more normal and fulfill what society expects of them. And then, even when the love turns forced and toxic, they stay, afraid of the alternative. There are two B-sides from their earlier albums that I think encapsulate this whole idea well. The first is Fragile, which is about staying in a relationship that's always at its breaking point, but still saying, "You shouldn't be this over." And the other is Heartbreak Terminal, which is about trying hard to keep a relationship going despite being aware that we're missing the perfect mate for two of us. This inability to break out of the cycle also applies to same-gender couples, who stay together in fear that they'll never find anyone else who understands them the same way. Or they stay because they've been conditioned to think they're inherently broken inside, so they don't deserve anything better. The reason I'm talking about all of this is to prove the main thesis of this video. OnlyOneOf identified religious norms and the way they've shaped society's outlook on human romance and sexuality as a cause for unhealthy patterns in our lives. Religion enforces a dichotomy of good and evil, and things that are natural to humans are often placed in the second category. OnlyOneOf want to explore the spectrum between the two because good and evil aren't objective, but depend on personal definitions. Trying to fit into the religious understanding of it causes us to demonize completely natural aspects of ourselves. It makes us less connected to both our own nature and each other. A big thing in Christianity is the so-called redemptive suffering, summed up neatly in this quote. Each man in his sufferings can also become a sharer in the redemptive suffering of Christ, which basically means that because Jesus died in pain for the sins of humans, we too can be forgiven if we subject ourselves to pain. People who are raised religious tend to remain in toxic relationships because they were led to believe that unhappiness in a blessed relationship is better than a happy unblessed relationship that God disapproves of. If those are the things you've been told your whole life, that you can only truly fall in love once, that if it hurts you, you just have to try harder and that pain is deserved and virtuous, you're going to internalize that, and when you start to deconstruct this way of thinking, it can feel scary. Tear of God is very reminiscent of Sage, as it's about the boy's repentance for following his impulses. But while Sage was apologetic, this time the boy boldly states that he can't stop his lust. He's still afraid, but he actively chooses not to indulge his religious guilt any further, so his journey takes him in the opposite direction from Angel and A Song of Ice and Fire. Although, as you'll see later, there will still be many parallels. This is only the first step towards freedom, and many of these things remain deeply rooted in him. Tear of God is the first song on the album that's gender neutral, which I think was an intentional decision. For all that the boy regrets about his behavior in the relationship which turned toxic, there's a much larger struggle going on inside him.
널 밀어내봐도 더 많이 나를 당겨 너랑 존재는 크래션 헤어날 수 없게 너를 가져 뒤섞인 pain 여전히 깨 있어 너는 나를 깨워.
On top of the parallels to Question Mark, waking up as a metaphor appears in a few other songs.
넌 깨어나지 잠에 아슬아슬한 순간을 깨우기 바래.
This inner conflict is about him being no longer able to suppress his growing awareness of his attraction to men. The boy feels the promised paradise slipping away as he realizes he can no longer reach it, as there is no place for the likes of him there. He tries to feel closer to God again, but it's not the same anymore. His journey of self-discovery already put distance between his faith and himself, and going back just causes him to feel more guilty. So he takes a different approach. I called it you, but it was actually me. One possible interpretation would be that the boy is embracing the aspects of himself that he wished to keep at a distance, separate from himself, things he didn't want to acknowledge as being who he is, but now sees that all of this is him. The description says, through the last track of the album, the boy's narrative of impulse ends with his confession in a low-lying voice. I called it you, but it was actually me. Confession is a word with both religious and secular meaning. However, the phrase itself is very reminiscent of call me by your name, which relates to the idea of being two halves of a whole, seeing yourself reflected in another person and seeing them in yourself. Before that, the boy wanted to become one with his lover by wearing her scent on himself. It was purely physical and too shallow to build an actual connection. This time, it seems the connections he seeks are more emotional and intellectual. So perhaps, after confessing his sins and not getting a response, he comes to the conclusion that people are closer to him than God. He used to believe he was made in God's image, but I called it you, but it was actually me, indicates a connection between the creations, people finding their reflections in each other instead. If instinct part 1 was erOs, instinct part 2 would be thanatOs, a drive towards aggression, destruction, and death. If we look at death and destruction as something not violent, but necessary for growth, a step before rebirth rather than something final, then we can clearly observe it in skinz and ultimate bliss. The boy engages in the process of getting rid of the things that held him back, effectively killing his past self throughout the album. This idea of erOs and thanatOs also seems to be present in the choreographies, and specifically the way they show crosses. In libidO, love's cross pose and 9 kneeling, things which are tied to religion, are eroticized, tying them to life and sexuality. In skinz though, it looks like Rie is being crucified, and later Junji is taken off the cross, which would then signify death and the beginning of resurrection.
I want to get that Jesus on the cross look, you know what I mean?
Saying. I think that crucifixion must have been really good for your core because...
Oh, absolutely. Jesus had like the best out. He had the right idea.
Emotion beneath innate nature suggests more focus on the inner feelings rather than the physical in this album. The boy stopped seeing other people as separate from himself and started looking into their shared humanity, the things that are underneath the skin. The sound of this track is rough, the synth from skinz combining with a fast ticking clock at the end, giving it a sense of the boy's urgency. It's desperate and slightly aggressive because he's still young and impulsive, and there's this whole side of him that he's been suppressing that's just waiting to get out. The boy begins the process of letting go of the fear that love will hurt and opening up to an emotional connection. The songs on Instinct Part 2 all correspond with the song on Part 1. Skinz, like libidO, is an internal monologue of acceptance. The description shows that now the boy understands that things like looks and gender don't matter to him. He accepts the full spectrum of his sexuality. Like that quote about repression influencing his subconscious behavior, by accepting his queerness, he also starts to understand and empathize with other people. He now knows that in order for a relationship to work, he needs to look beneath the physical and see the person inside. This line relates to the idea of death and rebirth. Getting rid of his past self means he's going to become a new person. Breaking up with his lover means he'll fall in love again, and no longer believing in God means he'll find a new higher purpose.
거짓된 건 벗어둬 어차피 우린 시들어 가고 있어 virus 속에 Why do you keep this? That's why we will keep it this With this virus we're losing some sense of the balance
We've seen a reference to the virus in Angel.
심장 박동은 계속 커지고 virus I'm so sick and tired gonna miss and
Back then, they could hide themselves behind the angel who would protect them, but now they're facing it head-on. In my understanding, this is a metaphor for societal norms and pressures which affect all of us, and force us to behave a certain way, fit into a specific mold. As the lyrics say, you don't have immunity to infection.
난 꿈을 꾸기 원해 멀어져게 you don't have immunity
We're all in some way infected by the standards and norms which surround us.
신념은 나에게 독 둘러잡은 침묵 불안하게 살게 구리한 적 없는 꿈
This line indicates that religion and believing in God is also part of this pressure. The boy is asking himself,
And I'm talking to myself 결국 같아지고 refuse my skin
I know that a lot of people find this line nonsensical, but to me it seemed like he's trying to trivialize the oppressive system he'd been brought up in, make it into something insignificant and funny like a wiggling worm, so it loses its power over him. Once he confronts the things that poisoned his view of the world and himself, he can bloom, while everyone else withers. We'll go back to the term delusion and this whole metaphor later on, so for now, notice that the delusion hasn't actually left him. It's still in his head, he just changed his way of looking at it, and it's still affecting his choices. Since the skinz music video seems to be misunderstood a lot, and also this whole thing will be important when we talk about Snapchat later on, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the role of technology in their music videos. In Savannah, the members sing about feeling trapped. And the only freedom they find is when they express their desires freely. We can see that they're being watched, which results in them being chased and captured in Sage. The person on the Dora Maar picture is plugged into machinery, although it's hard to say whether they're the one controlling this space with their mind or are the one being controlled. Angel, which also includes this picture for a brief second, has them trapped under surveillance, and A Song of Ice and Fire is described as a virtual space in which they exist for all eternity. Technology seems to be something that's used against them, and while they have vehicles to escape in or access to social media, they still find themselves under the control of someone with more power and authority. If we look at it like that, the masked people could actually be on their side, helping them escape from the cameras and hide among the crowd again. I might be reading into it way too deep, but their presence seems to suggest that it's better to live a hidden life where nobody knows your true identity, but at least you're not persecuted and forced to pretend. All of those music videos are a stark contrast to libidO, where they reconnect with nature and express themselves freely, while the only technology we do see is being used for leisure. Nobody's watching them, there's no crowd to hide in, or anyone who would try to force them to suppress their curiosity. Before libidO, most of the music videos took place during the night, which shows how their hidden feelings are finally being brought out into the light of day. But just like all the other places in the music videos seem unreal, this too can only be a summer dream. Eventually they have to go back into society and face the reality of their choices. In skinz, it's unclear whether technology is being used against them or not. The Instinct series seems to hold a lot of points of view: the boy, the members' characters, and now the addition of the viewer. There is a sense of them being spied on, like in Savannah, but we also know that they're aware of the person behind the camera and invite them along. The POV person seems to be a fan who fantasizes about being a part of the members' personal lives, too caught up in the parasocial relationship they created as idols, unable to escape, which we see when the very end of the music video shows the very beginning, creating a loop. This ending signifies an eternal entrapment for the members as well, forever watched even after finding freedom. There is a second interpretation though, which is that the members are using the POV person to involve us in their art, show that they know we see ourselves as part of it because of how we understand and relate to it. They managed to free themselves from the negative influence of technology and repurposed it for their own gain, to connect with fans. Personally, I think that DMV is doing both, critiquing a shallow reading of their art as fan service, and helping people who take the time to understand their art feel welcome, essentially giving them a day off where they can imagine they're on a trip, making eternal memories together. It's OnlyOneOf's way of saying, we want you to see yourself in our art. Existence precedes essence. This is a reversal of the widely accepted philosophical concept that a thing's existence is defined by its essence or fundamental nature. Instead, Sartre comes to believe that things exist first, their essence later defined by one's subjective perceptions or consciousness. This view of the world goes directly against religious dogma and objective morality. Despite the title being Nausea, it's the most peaceful of all the tracks, because the boy is at peace with himself. There's a new someone in his life, and he realizes he likes looking at their face as they read a book. Although the idea of the album is that gender doesn't matter, I'll be referring to the boy's new lover as he from now on, because it makes sense within the larger narrative. The whole album is gender neutral though, and I think it's because now it's not just about the boy's story, but about each individual's reading of it, and you're invited to relate to it in your own way. Suit Dance is, in a way, encouraging someone to come to the same conclusions he did. It focuses on physical aspects and wanting the other to act on his instincts, but there is also an element of helping him find identity and freedom in it. It explores similar ideas as Instinct, following someone with his eyes and wanting to be close to them so they can both act on their desires. Now, the line makes me think of I called it you, but it was actually me. I'm a bit confused by who is who exactly in the lyrics. It might be a translation issue, but it's hard to tell apart the me and you sometimes. They seem to blend together, and I think it's part of the idea. They're both wearing suits and admiring themselves in the mirror, but also see a reflection of themselves when looking at each other. His story repeats itself as the boy gets addicted to his lover again. Gaslighting takes it further than byredO though. The boy is no longer addicted only to the scent of his lover, but the entire person, wanting to be isolated, controlled, and changed completely to fit him, even if it destroys his sense of self. Although he no longer believes in God, the idea that there needs to be someone above him, someone more holy than him he can answer to, doesn't go away easily. After all, he's been raised to believe that suffering cleanses you of sin, and he still holds a lot of religious guilt. God desires to fill us with His light, His power, to fill us with Himself. He seems to feel a kind of devotion one should not have towards another person, as it upholds them as a higher being, subsequently reducing their humanity and making it impossible to be equal. Based on what happens in Ultimate Bliss, we can assume the lover/gaslighter has also been raised religious, and has the same hang-ups as the boy, but is still at a beginner stage of his journey to full self-acceptance. The way he deals with his guilt is opposite to the boy. He elevates himself into a holy figure who can do no wrong, using the boy's weakness against him.
넌 내게 말해 아무 일 없대 You better trust in me just like I'm saying 넌 너무 예민해 나만 믿으면 돼 Don't need to worry 난 내게 말해 아무 일 없대 You better trust in me just like I'm saying 난 너무 예민해 너만 믿을래 Don't need to worry.
It looks to me like he's deeply insecure, but desperately tries to seem in control, manipulating the boy into believing it. The boy is torn between not trusting him and wanting to submit.
Trust baby, look at my side You 확인하지 왜 어쩌다 I want you to teach me Grab me when I'm tiddly Everything is being mirrored by your head.
The gaslighter wants them to be each other's mirrors, just like in Suit Dance, but he takes it too far. They're both forcing themselves to be someone they're not, to fit a religious model of a god and follower, so their connection isn't genuine. The line
I know it could be the same
comes from A Song of Ice and Fire, after all.
I know I could be the same
And just like fire and ice that have gotten too close, they're a destructive force the more they try to fit each other. The description tells us that whatever good memories they make disappear without a trace. They realize the instability of their relationship, and yet they're not ready to let go. They're deeply devoted to each other, and they can use that devotion to fix their relationship or ruin each other completely. Now, this sounds like a wild assumption, until you realize that gaslighting isn't where the parallels to A Song of Ice and Fire end. The description under it says, in a virtual space, one season repeats itself for years and years, and love is like a fantasy that takes place in that virtual space. As long as you and I exist, as long as we love and fight each other, it forms our own story that's different from the flow of time for others. We've seen that technology has been used to control them and trap them in a relationship in which they suppress their true nature. There are a couple lines in Sage that marry this idea of a virtual space and repression. Skinz was ambiguous about whether they managed to free themselves or not, because the circle repeats like a glitch in the system. Come to think of it, the virus in Skinz could have a double meaning. A virus that affects people's bodies and minds, and a virus that affects technology. I theorized that the virus, parasite, and delusion all referred to religious and social conditioning. They affect our development and well-being, and they trap us in a specific version of reality, one that is just a distorted version of what our lives could be. The Sage music video shows religious symbols alongside modern inventions, indicating both to not be natural. Religion is placed as just another man-made thing, a construct which keeps evolving along with society, and is used to oppress and control. Snapchat sounds really happy, and unlike any other OnlyOneOf song. The ending sound is of a phone being locked, meaning all of that happiness was inside the virtual space, the same one that the loving and fighting took place in. The moment the boy locks his phone, he steps out of the delusion into reality, and the next thing we hear is "Come with me" as Ultimate Bliss begins. Ultimate Bliss is a bite of the forbidden fruit with no guilt. It's a rejection of all that was influenced by religion in the boy's life, all that existed in the delusion he left behind the moment he exited the virtual space. It's the ultimate death and rebirth. He finally lets himself acknowledge all the things he'd been suppressing since libidO, so the subconscious becomes transparent. The line is an echo of Even though he encouraged his lover to do the same before, he's only now managed to do so himself. This time God isn't present at all in the song, there is no regret and apologies. He's ready to let go of the ideas he'd been brought up believing in, and there is catharsis in leaving it all behind. But he's still experiencing a lot of conflicting emotions.
설렘인지 두려움인지도 불확실해 숨쉴 수 없이 심장이 뛰어 툭 터질 듯해 손을 댈수록 망친 그림처럼 돌이킬 수 없단 걸 알고 있지만
Would You Come With Me shows that he wants to take his lover with him, build a paradise for the two of them on their own rules. There is still hope for them, as long as they can get rid of all these messed up ideas and stop feeling like there needs to be a higher power involved in their relationship. Neither of them is God and neither is the follower, they're both Adam and Eve who made their choice to bite the forbidden fruit and leave. Are we being punished or are we dreaming? Is yet another internal conflict the boy goes through. I think in this case it means that it's hard to tell whether this love they have is good or bad. He's conflicted because it's both painful and pleasurable, and religious people really like to force black and white thinking. The boy is just beginning to learn that some things are morally neutral. Not everything that hurts is punishment, not everything that feels good is a beautiful dream. The last two tracks are like a separating path, one towards the future, the other towards the past. Underground Idol Zero connects Instinct to the next project with the same relationships as in the music videos. I think the existence of the song on the album shows that the characters in Underground Idol have all experienced the boy's inner journey in some capacity. I feel like it's most obvious in Be Mine.
You let my spirit free hurricane 마음대로 너를 조각해도 너
And the cross in the background. I don't need something like hope, all I need is just you, directly contrasts Mill's line in Angel. And it also reminds me of Be Free. Even though it's broken and painful, let's face it together. Both of these descriptions are about overcoming hardship as long as they can rely on each other. The boy finally stops putting his lover on a pedestal. They're no longer a higher concept, a muse or an emotion, they're just a person. This is the second path, the one towards the past, which takes us back to the beginning of the boy's journey. The title seems to imply rebirth. The boy is a changed person, and so we reminisce about his beginning through this track. The instinct towards life and creation is back. As for the description, it seems to imply that if he were exploring his sexuality again, he wouldn't do the same mistakes. While it's normal to look back on your journey and wish you'd done things differently, these words imply a lot of regret. Maybe he's not fully content with where he ended up, maybe he's imagining a version of his life where the timing worked out better for him and his lover, and their journey wasn't so messy and painful. But maybe it shows that the journey isn't over just because the album has ended. Leaving all those things that held him back doesn't mean he doesn't still have some leftover repression. So he's back to square one, diving into his subconscious and accepting the natural parts of himself, a journey which sometimes takes your whole life. It's a bittersweet ending, but it feels realistic. The road was rocky, and just like at the end there is catharsis, there is also reflection about the past and anticipation for the future. Thank you so much for watching. I want to emphasize that I don't claim all the connections I've noticed to be the one true story that was intended from the start. I think the genius of OnlyOneOf's art lies in their ability to create something ambiguous that speaks volumes. Everything exists on a spectrum, it's a sum of dots that change their placement if you look at them from a slightly different angle. There is a ton that's yet to uncover here, themes of time and dreams which keep appearing in the lyrics and seem to be very important, but I haven't even begun to dig into. I chose to focus only on the things that helped me connect the dots in a way that makes sense in my mind, and so if this video sparked some ideas of your own, I'll be really happy to read all about it. And please don't forget to support OnlyOneOf's comeback, Soul Drift.